My son's fiance's mother looked at my simple cotton dress and whispered to her husband, "Michael's mother looks like the help." This is absolutely embarrassing. I just smiled and sipped my water. Because what Eleanor Ashford didn't know was that in exactly 12 minutes, my phone would ring. And when I answered it, 3 words would change everything. "Madam CEO, urgent, but I'm getting ahead of myself." Let me start from the beginning, because this story, it's about everything I've learned in 62 years about power, pride, and the dangerous assumption that you can judge a person's worth by their appearance. It started 3 weeks ago when my son Michael called me. I could hear the nervousness in his voice even before he spoke. "Mom," he said, drawing out the word like he used to do as a child when he wanted something. "Victoria's parents want to meet you." Victoria. My son's fiancée, 28 years old, beautiful, educated, and from what Michael had told me, came from serious money. Old money, as they say. The kind of wealth that gets passed down through generations along with country club memberships and family trusts. "That's wonderful, honey," I replied, genuinely pleased. I'd been waiting for this invitation. "When and where?" There was a pause. "Next Saturday, at the Ashford family's country club." Another pause. "Mom, there's something I need to tell you about Victoria's parents." I waited, knowing from experience that my son needed time to find his words. "They're particular," he finally said, "about status, about appearances, about, well, everything, really." I understood immediately what he wasn't saying. They were the type of people who measured worth in dollars and cents, who believed that money equaled class, who couldn't imagine that someone living in a modest apartment and taking public transportation might have anything valuable to offer. And that's when I made my decision. "Don't worry, Michael," I told him. "I'll be on my best behavior." What I didn't tell him was that I had no intention of revealing who I really was. Not yet, because over the years, I'd learned something invaluable. The way people treat you when they think you have nothing tells you everything you need to know about their character. But they had no idea what was coming. How could they? They looked at me and saw exactly what I wanted them to see. A simple woman in her 60s, living a quiet life, struggling to make ends meet. What they couldn't see was the empire I'd built over 40 years. An empire I ran from the shadows, through holding companies and trusted executives. Because I'd learned long ago that sometimes the most powerful position is the one nobody knows you hold. The week before the dinner, I went through my closet carefully. Not the closet in my modest apartment, but the one in my private office downtown. The one filled with designer suits and silk blouses, Italian leather shoes and diamond jewelry. I looked at each piece, remembering the deals I'd closed while wearing them, the boardrooms I'd commanded, the empires I'd acquired. Then I closed that closet and returned to my apartment. I chose a simple cotton dress. Pale blue, slightly faded from washing, comfortable shoes with worn soles, a handbag I'd bought at a department store sale 5 years ago. I looked in the mirror and saw exactly what I wanted the Ashfords to see. A woman of limited means, doing her best with what little she had. My assistant, Patricia, had called that morning. "Ms. Martinez," she'd said in her crisp, professional voice, "the quarterly reports are ready for your review." And the Ashford acquisition proposal came in. They're looking for a buyer for their manufacturing division. I'd smiled at the irony. "Hold off on responding to the Ashford proposal," I'd told her. "I want to meet them first." "In person." "Understood," Patricia had replied. She never questioned my decisions. In 15 years as my CFO, she'd learned to trust my instincts about people and business. Saturday arrived cool and clear. I took the number 42 bus to the edge of the city, then walked the final half-mile to the Hillcrest Country Club. I could have taken a car. I owned 3, actually, though none of them were registered in my name. But I wanted to arrive exactly as the Ashfords expected. Slightly out of breath, a bit dusty from the walk, obviously out of place in this world of manicured lawns and valet parking. The valet actually stopped me at the entrance. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, not unkindly. "The service entrance is around back," I smiled at him. "I'm here as a guest." The Ashford party? His eyes widened slightly, and I saw him reassess me, his gaze traveling from my worn shoes to my simple dress to my graying hair, pulled back in a practical bun. Of course, he said, though his tone suggested he thought there must be some mistake, right through the main doors. Inside, the country club was exactly what I'd expected. All dark wood paneling and oil paintings of men in hunting gear, crystal chandeliers and thick carpet that muffled every footstep. The kind of place designed to make you feel either completely at home or completely out of place, depending on which side of the velvet rope you belong to. I saw them before they saw me. The Ashford family, seated at a round table near the windows overlooking the golf course. Richard Ashford, in his late 60s, silver hair perfectly styled, wearing what I recognized as a custom-tailored suit. Eleanor, his wife, probably 15 years younger, blonde hair in an elegant updo, dripping in pearls and diamonds. And Victoria, my son's fiancée, beautiful in a way that suggested expensive personal trainers and premium skincare products. Michael sat between Victoria and her mother, and I could see the tension in his shoulders even from across the room. Then Eleanor saw me. I watched her face carefully. The initial smile of greeting, then the flicker of confusion as she took in my appearance, then something else. Something that looked uncomfortably like disgust, quickly masked behind the expression of forced politeness. Grace. Michael stood up, relief evident in his voice. He crossed to me quickly and gave me a hug. Mom, I'm so glad you made it. Of course, honey, I said, squeezing his hand. I wouldn't miss meeting Victoria's family for anything. But as Michael led me to the table, I saw Eleanor lean over and whisper something to her husband. Richard's eyes flicked to me, then away. And Victoria? Victoria looked uncomfortable, her perfectly manicured hands fidgeting with her napkin. This was going to be interesting. Mother, father, Victoria said, her voice carefully neutral. This is Michael's mother, Grace Martinez. I extended my hand to Richard first. His handshake was brief, perfunctory. Eleanor's was even shorter, her fingers barely touching mine before pulling away. How lovely to finally meet you, Eleanor said, though her smile didn't reach her eyes. Please sit down. The waiter appeared immediately, and I noticed how his attention focused entirely on the Ashfords, as if I were invisible. We've already ordered appetizers, Eleanor continued. I hope you don't mind. The service here can be so slow if you wait for everyone to arrive. The implication was clear. I was late. Never mind that I'd arrived exactly at the time Michael had told me. That's perfectly fine, I replied, settling into my chair. I'm not very hungry anyway. Eleanor's eyes sharpened. Oh, are you feeling well? At your age, it's so important to maintain proper nutrition. At my age. The first subtle jab. I smiled blandly. I'm feeling wonderful, thank you. Richard cleared his throat. So, Grace, Michael tells us you live in the city. What neighborhood? Riverside, I replied honestly. It was a modest area, mostly working-class families and retirees. Ah, Richard said, in a tone that suggested he knew exactly what kind of neighborhood that was. Convenient for public transportation, I imagine. Very convenient, I agreed. I took the bus here today, actually. It's quite pleasant this time of year. Eleanor's eyebrows rose so high they nearly disappeared into her hairline. The bus? Oh my. Richard, we really must help Michael set up a car service account for his mother. We can't have her taking public transportation at her age. That's when my phone buzzed in my purse. I glanced at it discreetly. Patricia's name flashed on the screen, followed by, Board meeting moved to Monday. Ashford proposal requires your decision by Tuesday. I silenced the phone and returned my attention to the table, where Eleanor was now holding forth about the importance of maintaining appearances. The appetizers arrived. Oysters on the half-shell, priced at $45 on the menu I'd glimpsed on the way in. Eleanor made a show of offering me some. Please, Grace, have as many as you'd like. They're complimentary for club members. The emphasis on club members was deliberate, a reminder of the exclusive world I was temporarily being allowed to enter. Thank you, I said, taking one. It was perfectly fresh, briny, and cold. I'd had better at restaurants I owned in Seattle and Boston, but I kept that observation to myself. So, Grace, Richard began, cutting into his oyster with surgical precision. What is it you do? For work? Here it was. The question I'd been waiting for. I'm semi-retired, I said truthfully. I do some consulting work when interesting opportunities come up. Consulting, Eleanor repeated, her tone suggesting she didn't quite believe me. How fascinating. In what field? Business management? Corporate restructuring, mostly. Richard's interest seemed to peak slightly. Anyone we might know? What companies? I smiled vaguely. I prefer to keep my client list confidential. Professional courtesy. Of course, Eleanor said quickly, though I could see she didn't believe I had any clients worth mentioning. And before you retired? I worked in the private sector, I said. Various positions over the years. How wonderful, Eleanor said in a tone that suggested it was anything but. So hard to build a career without a proper education. Did you manage to finish college? Michael shifted uncomfortably beside me. Mom went to state, he interjected. Full scholarship. State, Eleanor repeated. How accessible. I sipped my water and said nothing. I'd actually attended state for my undergraduate degree, then Harvard Business School for my MBA, then completed executive programs at Wharton and Stanford. But I saw no need to mention that now. Victoria finally spoke up. Grace, Michael has told me so much about how you raised him after his father passed. It must have been difficult managing alone. It was challenging, I acknowledged, but we managed. Michael was a wonderful child. Very little trouble. I'm sure he was, Eleanor said, though I imagine it was hard to provide him with certain advantages, private schools, travel abroad, that sort of thing. Michael attended excellent public schools, I replied evenly, and we took several wonderful trips together. Nothing exotic, of course, but meaningful memories nonetheless. Eleanor exchanged a glance with Richard that clearly said, exactly as we thought. Poor limited education, no connections. This woman is absolutely not suitable for our social circle. But then the main courses arrived, and Eleanor's interrogation took a more dangerous turn. Grace, Eleanor began, cutting delicately into her $60 sea bass. Richard and I have been thinking about Michael and Victoria's future. As have I replied. They make a lovely couple. Yes, well, Eleanor continued, we want to make sure they start their marriage on the right foot. We've purchased them a home in Westbrook Hills. 5 bedrooms, pool, finished basement. We thought it would be perfect for starting a family. How generous, I said, meaning it. Whatever else could be said about the Ashfords, they clearly loved their daughter. Of course, we're also setting up a trust fund for Victoria, Richard added. She'll have complete financial independence. We believe it's important for young women to have their own security. Very wise, I agreed. Eleanor set down her fork and looked directly at me. We're also contributing significantly to the wedding. Everything first class, of course. We've booked the Grand Plaza Hotel, hired the best caterer in the city, and Victoria's dress is being custom designed in Paris. It sounds beautiful, I said, and meant it. Why shouldn't Victoria have a beautiful wedding? But then Eleanor's expression changed, becoming what she probably thought was sympathetic. Grace, we understand that as Michael's mother, you'll want to contribute something to the wedding as well. We know that finances might be limited for you, so please, don't feel any pressure. Your presence is gift enough. There it was. Not quite an insult, but definitely a dismissal. You have nothing to offer, so please don't embarrass yourself by trying. Michael's face had gone red. Mother Ashford, that's not necessary. It's perfectly fine, I interrupted gently. Eleanor is being thoughtful. Eleanor smiled, apparently pleased that I was accepting my place. We just want everything to be comfortable for everyone. No stress, no strain on limited resources. That's when the waiter approached. But he didn't approach Eleanor or Richard. He came directly to me, leaning down discreetly. Ms. Martinez, he whispered. I apologize for the interruption, but Mr. Harrison asked me to inform you that your usual table upstairs is available if you'd prefer more privacy. The table went silent. Eleanor's fork paused halfway to her mouth. I'm sorry, what did you just say? The waiter, suddenly aware he'd said something wrong, straightened up. I was just informing Ms. Martinez. Your usual table? Richard interrupted, his voice sharp. Young man, I think you've confused our guest with someone else. The waiter looked between me and Richard, clearly uncertain. I don't think so, sir. Ms. Martinez has been a member here for— Thank you, David, I said softly. Please tell Mr. Harrison that I appreciate the offer. But I'm quite comfortable here with my family. Of course, Ms. Martinez, David replied, looking relieved, and quickly departed. The silence at the table was thunderous. Eleanor recovered first. Well, she said with a forced laugh, the staff here must be more confused than I thought. I've been a member of this club for 20 years and I don't recognize you from any of the member directories. I keep a low profile, I said simply. Apparently, Richard said, his tone skeptical. He turned to Michael. Michael, is your mother a member here? Michael looked at me, and I saw the confusion in his eyes. He'd had no idea. I'd never told him about any of my memberships, my properties, my holdings. He knew me as his mother, who lived modestly and worked quietly. Nothing more, I don't know, Michael said honestly. Victoria leaned forward. Grace, are you a member of Hillcrest? Before I could answer, Eleanor laughed again, this one more genuine but equally unkind. Don't be ridiculous, Victoria. The membership fee alone is $50,000 a year, plus the initial buy-in of $200,000. This is clearly a case of mistaken identity. Of course, I said mildly. It must be. But I could see Richard wasn't entirely convinced. He was a businessman after all, and he recognized the look in David's eyes. That wasn't confusion. That was recognition. So, Eleanor said, clearly eager to move past the awkward moment. As I was saying, Grace, we want you to feel included in the wedding, even if you can't contribute financially. Perhaps you could help with some of the smaller details? Addressing envelopes, perhaps? Or helping to coordinate the guest book? She was offering me tasks typically reserved for wedding assistants or unpaid volunteers. Michael's face was now bright red, and I could see Victoria shifting uncomfortably in her seat. That's very thoughtful, I said. Though I do actually have a small gift I'd like to give Michael and Victoria. Nothing elaborate, but something meaningful. Eleanor's smile was patronizing. Of course, dear. Every gift given with love is precious, regardless of its monetary value. My phone buzzed again. This time I glanced at it more openly. Patricia's message was marked urgent. Ashford situation developing. Need guidance on approach. I typed back quickly. Will handle personally. Prepare contingencies. Eleanor was watching me. Important message? She asked, her tone suggesting she doubted I could receive any message of real importance. Just work, I replied. On a Saturday? Eleanor laughed. Your employer certainly doesn't respect boundaries. You know, Grace, at your age you really should be thinking about full retirement. All this stress can't be good for your health. The dessert course arrived. Crème brûlée, technically perfect, caramelized sugar crackling under my spoon. I ate slowly, listening as Eleanor detailed her vision for Michael and Victoria's future. Of course, once they have children, Victoria will stop working, Eleanor was saying. A mother's place is with her children, don't you agree, Grace? I think every family should make the decision that works best for them, I replied carefully. Well, naturally, but there are standards to maintain, Eleanor continued. We can't have our grandchildren being raised by nannies while Victoria pursues some career. She said the word as if it were distasteful. I worked while raising Michael, I pointed out. Yes. Well, Eleanor said, and her meaning was clear. And look how that turned out. Your son is marrying into a family far above his raising. Richard cleared his throat. Grace, Eleanor, and I have actually been discussing something we'd like to propose to you. Oh? I set down my spoon. Yes, Eleanor picked up. We've been thinking about your situation. Living alone at your age, on a limited income. It must be quite stressful. I manage quite well, I said. I'm sure you do your best, Eleanor said, her smile not reaching her eyes. But we'd like to make you an offer. We own several properties around the city. One of them includes a small guest house, very charming, quite adequate for one person. We'd be happy to let you live there rent-free. I stayed very still. That's generous. There would be one small condition, Richard added. We'd ask that you give Michael and Victoria space to build their marriage. Perhaps see them every few months rather than every few weeks. We've found that too much family involvement can strain a young marriage. Translation: We'll house you if you agree to disappear from your son's life. Michael's chair scraped back. That's enough, he said, his voice tight. You don't get to— Michael, darling, we're just trying to help, Eleanor said quickly. Your mother is clearly struggling financially. We're offering her security. In exchange for what? Michael demanded. For her to stop being my mother? Don't be dramatic, Eleanor said. We're simply suggesting healthy boundaries. Boundaries you get to dictate? Michael's voice was rising. Several nearby tables were starting to glance our way. Michael, please, Victoria said softly, putting her hand on his arm. And that's when everything changed. That's when Eleanor made her fatal mistake. She looked directly at me and said, her voice dripping with false kindness, Grace, dear, you seem like a sweet woman. But let's be honest, you come from a different world than we do. Different class. Michael loves you, of course he does. You're his mother. But Victoria and Michael are building a life in our world now. A world of country clubs and charity galas and social expectations. A world where appearance matters. And frankly, having a mother-in-law who takes the bus and lives in Riverside doesn't quite fit the image we've worked so hard to build. The table fell silent. Michael stood up completely now, his napkin falling to the floor. How dare you? But I placed my hand on his arm, stopping him. It's all right, Michael, I said softly. It's not all right, Michael said, his voice shaking. Mom, I'm so sorry. I had no idea they would. Please sit down, honey, I said gently. There's something I need to say. Michael sat slowly, his jaw tight with anger. I looked at Eleanor, then at Richard, then at Victoria. You're right, I said. I do come from a different world than you. And you're right that appearance matters. Eleanor looked triumphant. I'm so glad you understand, Grace. This isn't personal. It's just, my phone rang, not buzzed, rang. With Patricia's ringtone, the one I'd programmed for truly urgent calls that couldn't wait. Excuse me? I said, pulling out my phone. I need to take this. Grace, really? Eleanor said, her voice sharp. We're in the middle of a conversation, but I'd already answered. Patricia, I said, and I didn't use my poor retired woman voice anymore. I used my boardroom voice, the one that had closed billion-dollar deals and faced down hostile takeovers. What is it? Ms. Martinez, Patricia's voice came through clear enough for the whole table to hear. I apologize for interrupting your dinner, but the board meeting has been moved up. They need your decision on the Ashford acquisition by Monday morning. Everyone at the table froze. The Ashford acquisition? Eleanor repeated faintly. I held up one finger, silencing her. How much are they asking? $42 million for the manufacturing division, Patricia replied. But the analysis shows we should offer 38 and not go higher than 40. Agreed, I said. Draft the preliminary offer. I'll review it tonight. Understood, Ms. Martinez. Also, Mr. Harrison from Hillcrest called. He wants to confirm you're still attending the members' gala next month. He's hoping you'll consider joining the board of directors. Tell him I'll think about it, I said. Is there anything else? Just one thing. The charitable foundation disbursement is ready for your approval. $50 million to the Women's Shelter Network, as you requested. Approved. Thank you, Patricia. I'll call you back in 30 minutes. I hung up. The silence at the table was absolute. Eleanor's face had gone pale. Did she say Ashford acquisition? I placed my phone carefully on the table. Yes. Your husband's company made a proposal to sell their manufacturing division. It came across my desk last week. Your desk? Richard's voice was barely above a whisper. What exactly is your position? I'm CEO of Martinez Holdings, I said simply. We're a private equity firm specializing in manufacturing acquisitions and restructuring. You might not have heard of us. We prefer to keep a low profile. Victoria's eyes were huge. Martinez Holdings. That's one of the companies my father was talking to about the sale. He said they were impossible to get a meeting with. The CEO never meets anyone in person. I make exceptions, I said, when I have a personal interest in the company. Eleanor found her voice. This is ridiculous. If you're some kind of CEO, why do you live in Riverside? Why do you take the bus? Why dress like someone with no money? I finished for her. Because I learned a long time ago that the way people treat you when they think you have nothing tells you everything you need to know about their character. Richard was doing calculations in his head. I could see it. If Martinez Holdings acquires our division at $40 million, that means you're prepared to spend. I have several acquisition targets this quarter, I said. The Ashford purchase is actually one of the smaller ones. Eleanor's hand had gone to her throat, touching her pearl necklace. Real pearls, I noticed, very fine. Probably worth about $70,000. I had a similar set in my office safe. Mine were worth slightly more. But you? Eleanor started, then stopped. The waiter called you Ms. Martinez and Mr. Harrison. You really are a member here? I've been a member for 15 years, I confirmed. I joined when I acquired the Sterling Corporation. Their CEO at the time sponsored me. I usually use the private dining room upstairs. Mr. Harrison knows I prefer to keep my membership quiet. Michael was staring at me like he'd never seen me before. Mom, is this all true? Yes, honey, I said gently. Though I don't usually get involved in the day-to-day operations anymore. I have excellent people who handle most things. But for certain decisions, especially acquisitions, I like to be hands-on. Why didn't you tell me? Michael asked, and I could hear the hurt in his voice. Because I wanted you to make your own way, I said. I wanted you to work for your success, to value it, to understand what it really means to build something. If you'd known about the money, about the company, would you have worked as hard? Would you have become the man you are now? That's when David, the waiter, returned. But this time someone was with him. A distinguished gentleman in his 70s wearing an impeccably tailored suit. Grace, he said warmly, approaching our table. David told me you were here. I wanted to say hello personally. This was Charles Harrison, the owner of Hillcrest Country Club. Also the owner of 3 other country clubs, 2 luxury hotels, and a chain of high-end restaurants. His net worth was estimated at somewhere around $200 million. Charles, I greeted him. How lovely to see you. I hope David conveyed my message about your usual table, Charles said. Though I can see you're enjoying the main dining room. Wonderful choice for a family dinner. He nodded politely to the Ashfords and to Michael and Victoria. Charles, let me introduce you, I said. This is my son Michael and his fiancée Victoria. And Victoria's parents, Richard and Eleanor Ashford. Charles's face lit up. Ah, wonderful. Grace has told me so much about Michael. Congratulations on your engagement, young man. He shook Michael's hand warmly. Then he turned to Richard and Eleanor. Ashford, are you the Ashfords of Ashford Manufacturing? Yes, Richard managed to say. Excellent company, Charles said. Though I heard you were looking to sell the manufacturing division. Tough market for that sector right now. Yes, we're in discussions with several potential buyers, Richard said, trying to regain some composure. Well, you're in good hands with Grace, Charles said, smiling at me. Best business mind I've ever encountered. When she acquired my restaurant chain back in 2008 and then restructured it, she saved about 200 jobs and increased profitability by 40%. Then she sold it back to me at a fair price. Most ethical business person I've ever worked with. Eleanor looked like she might faint. Anyway, Charles continued, I won't interrupt your dinner any longer. Grace, I hope you'll reconsider joining our board. We need your expertise. And your generous donation for the Youth Scholarship Fund was tremendously appreciated. $50,000 will change a lot of young lives. It was my pleasure. Charles, I said. He nodded to the table and left. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Eleanor said, in a very small voice, $50,000. To a country club scholarship fund. I believe in supporting youth opportunities, I said simply. You offered me a guest house, Eleanor continued, as if in a daze. You offered me charity. You offered me charity first, I pointed out. Envelope addressing, remember? Richard was still processing. Martinez Holdings. I've been trying to get a meeting with your company for 3 months. My assistant said the CEO never takes meetings personally. I don't, usually, I confirmed. But Michael mentioned he was getting married. And he mentioned Victoria's last name. And I admit, I was curious about the family he was marrying into. So you came here pretending to be poor, Eleanor said, and now there was anger in her voice. You deceived us. You made fools of us. I came here as exactly who I am, I corrected her. A mother who loves her son. I never lied about anything. I do live in Riverside in a modest apartment. I do take the bus. I do wear simple clothes. Those things are all true. But you let us believe— I let you believe exactly what you wanted to believe, I interrupted. That someone who takes the bus and wears simple clothes couldn't possibly have value. Couldn't possibly have accomplished anything. Couldn't possibly belong in your world. Victoria had been silent through all of this, but now she spoke. That's not fair. You did deceive us, did I asked. Or did I simply not correct your assumptions? Your mother asked what I did for work, and I told her, consulting and corporate restructuring. That's true. I consult for my own companies and I restructure corporations. She asked about my education and I told her I went to State. Also true. I did go to State. I didn't mention Harvard Business School because she didn't ask. This is semantics, Eleanor protested. You deliberately made yourself appear poor? Struggling? I finished. No, Eleanor. I appeared exactly as I always do. You interpreted my appearance through your own prejudices. You saw someone who didn't wear designer clothes and drove up in a town car with a driver, and you concluded I had no value. Michael stood up again. Mom, I need to understand. Why did you really come here like this? I looked at my son, this wonderful man I'd raised, and I told him the truth. Because, Michael, I needed to know what kind of family you were marrying into. I've built a successful business over 40 years. I've worked with hundreds of people, closed thousands of deals. And do you know what I've learned? That you can tell more about a person by how they treat someone they think can't help them than by how they treat someone they think can benefit them. I turned to Eleanor and Richard. You looked at me and saw someone you could dismiss. Someone whose feelings didn't matter because I had nothing you wanted. You offered me charity, suggested I disappear from my son's life, implied I was an embarrassment. You did all of that because you thought I was powerless. But we were trying to help, Eleanor protested weakly. No, I said firmly. You were trying to remove what you saw as an obstacle to your perfect social image. If you truly wanted to help, you would have asked what I needed. You would have listened. You would have treated me with basic human dignity regardless of what you thought my financial situation was. Richard's face was red. So what now? You're going to back out of the acquisition deal? Punish us for tonight? No, I said, and I meant it. Business is business. If your company is a good fit for our portfolio and the price is right, we'll move forward with the acquisition. I don't mix personal feelings with business decisions. Then why tell us? Eleanor asked. Why reveal yourself now? Because, I said, and I looked at Victoria as I spoke. My son is about to marry your daughter. That makes us family, and I needed you to understand something very important before that happens. Victoria was watching me with wide eyes. I could see her reevaluating everything she thought she knew about me. Michael is my son, I continued. He is the most important person in my world. I raised him alone after his father died. I worked 3 jobs to keep us afloat. I went to night school to get my degree while he slept. I built my business from nothing, working 20-hour days, sacrificing everything, so that he could have opportunities I never had. My voice didn't rise, but my intensity did. And I never told him about the money, about the success, because I wanted him to understand that wealth means nothing if you don't have character. That success means nothing if you don't have integrity. That power means nothing if you don't have compassion. I paused, letting that sink in. I let you insult me tonight. I let you offer me charity. I let you suggest I disappear from Michael's life. I did all of that because I needed to see what you would do, how you would treat someone you thought was beneath you. And now I know. Eleanor's hands were shaking. You were just showing me exactly who you are, I said. People who judge others by their bank accounts. People who believe money equals worth. People who think someone who takes the bus can't possibly have anything valuable to offer. So what do we do now? Richard asked, and for the first time he sounded uncertain. That's up to you, I said. And it's up to Michael and Victoria. I turned to my son. Michael, I love you more than anything in this world. If you want to marry Victoria, I will support that decision completely. But I need you to understand something. Marriage isn't just about loving someone. It's about the families you're joining, the values you're choosing to embrace, the world you're deciding to live in. Michael was holding Victoria's hand, but his eyes were on me. What are you saying, Mom? I'm saying that tonight you saw two different approaches to life. You saw your future in-laws treat someone they thought was poor with contempt. And now you've seen their reaction to learning that person had power all along. Not regret for their behavior, but embarrassment at being caught. Eleanor started to protest, but I held up my hand. I'm not saying this to be cruel, I told her. I'm saying it because it's true. You're not sorry you treated me poorly. You're sorry you treated someone with money poorly. There's a difference, Victoria spoke up, her voice quiet. You're right. Everyone looked at her. You're right, she repeated, looking at me. My parents, we did judge you. I did judge you. I saw your dress and your shoes and I thought... She paused, tears forming in her eyes. I thought Michael's mother was going to be an embarrassment. I was relieved when my parents offered to help you because I thought it would keep you... distant. Out of the way. Michael's hand fell away from hers. Victoria? I'm not proud of it, Victoria said. And now the tears were falling. But it's true. And now I'm sitting here realizing that you, Grace, have accomplished more than anyone at this table. You built an empire. You raised a son alone. You did all of that while working 3 jobs and going to night school. And all I've ever done is spend my parents' money and look down on people who don't have as much. Eleanor looked horrified. Victoria, don't say such things. It's true, Mother. Victoria's voice rose. It's true and you know it. We've spent years judging people by their clothes and their cars and their zip codes. And tonight, we treated a woman who could buy our company a dozen times over like she was nothing. The tables around us had gone silent. I realized our entire conversation had been overheard by at least a dozen nearby diners. Richard seemed to realize this too. Perhaps we should continue this conversation somewhere more private, he said quietly. No, I said. I think we should end it right here. I stood up, and Michael immediately stood with me. I'm going to leave now, I said. And I'm going to give all of you time to think. Michael, Victoria, you need to decide what kind of life you want to build together, what values you want to center that life around. Eleanor, Richard, you need to decide if you're capable of treating people with respect regardless of their apparent circumstances. And what about you? Eleanor asked, her voice small. What are you going to do? I'm going to go home, I said simply, to my modest apartment in Riverside. I'm going to take the bus, because despite what you think, I actually enjoy it. I like seeing the city, talking to regular people, being part of the world instead of separate from it. I picked up my worn handbag. And on Monday, I'm going to review the acquisition proposal for your company. And I'm going to make a business decision based on business factors, not on what happened tonight. But, Richard started. But nothing, I interrupted. Richard, I've been in business for 40 years. I've worked with people I liked and people I couldn't stand. I've done deals with companies run by people who insulted me, dismissed me, underestimated me. And you know what? I succeeded anyway, because I don't let personal feelings interfere with sound business decisions. I looked at Eleanor. However, I will say this. If Michael and Victoria do get married, I expect to be treated with the same respect you'd show to any family member. Not because of my money, but because I'm Michael's mother. If you can't do that, then Michael will have to make a choice. And I think we both know what choice he'll make. Michael moved to stand beside me. Mom's right. And Victoria, I love you. But I won't be part of a family that treats my mother like she's less than human because of how she dresses or where she lives. Victoria wiped her tears. I understand. And I want to be better. I want to learn from this. Then you have time, I said. Take it. Think about tonight. Think about who you want to be. And then I delivered the final piece of information that changed everything. One more thing, I said, pulling out my phone. I pulled up an email and showed it to Richard. This is the acquisition proposal from your company. It's asking for $42 million. Richard nodded, confused about where this was going. And this, I said, pulling up another document, is the valuation my team did. We think your manufacturing division is actually worth closer to $60 million. You're underpricing it significantly. Richard's eyes widened. What? But our financial advisors said, your financial advisors are wrong, I said bluntly. Or they're not seeing the potential we see. Either way, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to offer you $55 million for the division. Not 40, 55. And I'm going to give you a week to consider it. But there's a condition. What condition? Richard asked warily. The condition is that you take that extra $13 million and do something meaningful with it. Start a scholarship fund for kids from working-class neighborhoods. Fund some public schools. Support some youth programs. Do something that acknowledges that people who take the bus and wear simple clothes have just as much potential as people who belong to country clubs. Eleanor's mouth opened and closed. You're giving us an extra $13 million and telling us what to do with it? I'm offering you a fair price for your company, I corrected, and I'm suggesting you use some of the proceeds to make the world a little better. But ultimately, it's your choice, just like everything else tonight has been about choices. I turned to leave, but Michael caught my arm. Mom, wait. Let me drive you home. Honey, I'm fine taking the bus. Please, he said. I have so many questions. I looked at his face and saw the little boy who used to wait up for me when I worked late, who would ask me about my day even when he was so tired he could barely keep his eyes open. All right, I said. But Victoria should come too. You two need to talk. Victoria stood up immediately. I'd like that, if that's okay? Of course it is, I said. As we walked toward the exit, I heard Eleanor call out, Grace! Wait! I turned. She was standing now, her perfect composure finally cracking. I'm sorry, she said, and this time I believed her. I'm truly sorry, not because of your money or your position, but because of how we treated you. How I treated you. You didn't deserve that. I nodded, acknowledging her apology. Thank you, Eleanor. That means something. Will you... She hesitated. Will you give us another chance? Can we start over? I thought about it for a long moment. Not start over, I finally said. Because we can't undo tonight. But maybe we can start fresh. Build something new from here. Eleanor nodded, tears in her eyes. Richard stood beside his wife. The acquisition, he said. Your offer. We accept. Don't accept yet, I told him. Think about it. Really think about it. Talk to your financial advisors. Make sure it's the right decision. I'll have my team send over the formal proposal on Monday. And the scholarship fund? Eleanor asked. That's up to you, I said. I'm not going to force you to do anything. But I hope you'll think about it. As we left the country club, I saw Charles Harrison watching from near the bar. He raised his glass to me in a silent toast. I smiled and nodded back. In the car, Michael drove in silence for several minutes before he finally spoke. Why didn't you ever tell me? Would it have made you a better person? I asked gently. He thought about it. No, probably would have made me worse. More entitled, more like Victoria's parents. That's why, I said. I wanted you to understand the value of work, the importance of earning what you have, the dignity that comes from building something yourself. Victoria spoke from the back seat. My parents built something too. Their company has been in the family for generations. You're right, I acknowledged. And there's value in that. Generational wealth, when used wisely, can create opportunities and security. But it can also create blind spots. It can make you forget that most people don't have what you have, that most people struggle in ways you never will. And you wanted Michael to understand that, Victoria said slowly. I wanted him to have empathy, I said. I wanted him to be able to see people, not as categories or classes or bank accounts. Michael pulled up in front of my apartment building. It was indeed modest in a working-class neighborhood, but it was clean and safe and comfortable. Do you really like living here? Michael asked, looking at the building with new eyes. I do, I said honestly. I have another place, a penthouse downtown, but I prefer it here. The people are real. The community is genuine. When Mrs. Chen next door bakes extra dumplings, she brings them over not because she's trying to network or impress me, but because she's a kind person who likes to share. As I reached for the car door handle, Victoria asked one more question. What happens now? With us, with the engagement? I turned to look at her. Really look at her. And I saw something in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Doubt, yes. Shame, yes. But also, curiosity. A willingness to learn. That's not up to me, I said. That's up to you and Michael. But I will tell you this. If you do get married, I'm not going to be the kind of mother-in-law who interferes or judges or holds grudges. Tonight happened. We can't change that, but we can choose how we move forward. I want to do better, Victoria said, and her voice was earnest. I want to learn. About business, about empathy, about seeing people the way you do. Then you will, I said simply. The fact that you recognize the need to change means you're already changing. Exactly 1 year later, I stood in the bridal suite at the Grand Plaza Hotel. Victoria was putting the final touches on her Paris-designed wedding dress, and Eleanor was adjusting her daughter's veil. But something was different. For one thing, Eleanor had insisted I be there for the getting ready photos. You're Michael's mother, she'd said. You belong here. For another, half the guest list was different than originally planned. Instead of just Eleanor and Richard's society friends, there were also scholarships recipients from the fund they'd established. Kids from Riverside and neighborhoods like it, wearing their Sunday best, excited to be part of something special. The scholarship fund had become Eleanor's passion project. She'd thrown herself into it with surprising dedication, interviewing candidates personally, learning their stories, seeing them as individuals rather than categories. Grace, Eleanor said now, coming over to me. She was wearing a beautiful mother-of-the-bride dress, but she'd also worn comfortable shoes. Can I show you something? She pulled out her phone and showed me a video. It was of a young girl, maybe 16, standing at a podium. This is Maria, Eleanor explained. She's one of our scholarship recipients. This is from her speech at the scholarship banquet last month. I watched as Maria spoke. A year ago, I didn't think college was possible for me. My mom works 2 jobs and my dad drives a taxi. We don't have money for tuition. But then Mrs. Ashford called and told me about the scholarship. And when I met her, do you know what she asked me? She asked me about my dreams. Not my grades, not my test scores, my dreams. And then she told me about someone who taught her that everyone's dreams matter, regardless of where they come from or what they have. In the video, Eleanor was crying. In the bridal suite, watching it again. She was crying again. Thank you, she said to me, for teaching me to see people. Really see them. But the biggest surprise came during the reception, when Richard stood up to give his father of the bride speech. A year ago, Richard began, I was a successful businessman who thought he had everything figured out. I knew how to close deals, how to manage companies, how to navigate the business world, and I thought I knew how to judge people. He paused, looking at me. Then I met Grace Martinez, and she taught me the most important business lesson I've ever learned. The room was silent, all attention on Richard. She taught me that you can't judge a person's worth by their appearance. That the most powerful people in the room are sometimes the ones you'd never expect. And that true class has nothing to do with money and everything to do with character. He held up his glass. Grace came to dinner a year ago dressed simply, arrived by bus, and let us make fools of ourselves. She could have revealed who she was immediately. She could have embarrassed us. She could have used her power to punish us for our prejudice. But she didn't. Instead, Richard continued, she offered us a better deal than we deserved for our company. She suggested we use the proceeds to create opportunities for others. And then she gave us time to learn, to grow, to become better people. He looked at Michael and Victoria. And because of her example, my daughter learned something crucial. That love and respect aren't about money or status. They're about seeing people for who they truly are. Richard raised his glass higher. So here's to Grace Martinez. The smartest person I've ever met. The most ethical business person I've ever encountered. And the best mother-in-law a family could ask for. The room erupted in applause. As people toasted and drank, Michael came over to me. Mom, he said, his eyes shining. Thank you. For everything. For raising me right. For teaching me what really matters, for being you. I hugged my son, this wonderful man, and I felt the kind of wealth that no bank account could ever measure. By the way, Michael whispered, Victoria and I have been talking about the future, about the values we want to build our life around. Oh? I said. We're starting a nonprofit, he said. We're calling it the Martinez Ashford Foundation. It'll focus on helping working-class families access education and opportunities. Victoria's going to run it. She's actually really passionate about it. I looked across the room at Victoria, who was talking animatedly with Maria from the scholarship program. Her Paris-designed dress was beautiful, but what made her shine was the genuine smile on her face. The real connection she was making with this young woman from a working-class family. I'm proud of both of you, I told Michael. We learned from the best, he replied. As the reception wound down, I found myself on the hotel's terrace, looking out at the city lights. Eleanor joined me carrying 2 glasses of champagne. Grace, she said, handing me a glass. I keep thinking about that dinner a year ago, about how differently things could have gone. What do you mean? I asked. I mean, what if you hadn't come that night? What if you'd just revealed who you were from the beginning? What if you'd let us continue in our ignorance? I thought about it. Then you wouldn't have learned. Michael and Victoria might have gotten married, but you would have continued judging people by their bank accounts. The scholarship fund wouldn't exist. Maria wouldn't be going to college, and you wouldn't be the person you are now. Eleanor nodded slowly. It was a gift, wasn't it? That night. You gave us a gift, even though it didn't feel like it at the time. Sometimes the most valuable gifts come wrapped in uncomfortable truths, I said. We stood in silence for a moment, watching the city lights twinkle below. You know what I realized? Eleanor said. That night, when you left in Michael's car, Richard and I stayed at the club for another 2 hours. We didn't talk. We just sat there, replaying everything we'd said, everything we'd done, and I realized something terrible. What was that? That I'd become exactly the kind of person I'd hated when I was younger. My family didn't always have money, Grace. We were middle class, working people. And when I was young, I watched my mother be treated poorly by wealthy people at her job. And I vowed I'd never be like that. She took a sip of champagne. But then I married Richard. His family had money. Real money. And slowly over years, I became exactly what I'd hated. I started judging people by their clothes and their cars. I started believing that wealth meant worth. But you changed, I said gently. Because you forced me to see myself clearly, Eleanor replied. And for that, I'm grateful. Even though it was the most humiliating night of my life, it was also the most important. I looked at Eleanor, this woman who had insulted me, dismissed me, tried to pay me to disappear from my son's life. And I saw someone different now, someone who had learned, who had grown, who had become better. Eleanor, I said, let me ask you something. And I want you to be honest. If you could go back to that night, knowing what you know now, would you change how you behaved? She thought about it carefully. I'd like to say yes. But honestly, I don't think I could have changed unless I'd gone through exactly what happened. I needed to feel that shame. I needed to confront my own prejudice. I needed to see the consequences of judging people by their appearance. That's a profound understanding, I said. It's one you gave me, she replied. And now I'm trying to pass it on. Through the scholarship fund, through the kids we're helping, through the example Victoria and Michael are setting. She turned to face me directly. Grace, I have one question. That night, when you sat there and let us insult you, when you listened to us offer you charity and suggest you disappear, how did you not lose your temper? How did you stay so calm? I smiled. Because I've learned that anger in the moment satisfies your ego, but patience over time changes lives. If I'd revealed myself immediately, you would have been embarrassed. But you wouldn't have learned anything except to be more careful about judging wealthy-looking people. By waiting, by letting you show me exactly who you were, I gave you the chance to see yourself clearly. And that's what creates real change. But weren't you hurt? Eleanor asked. Didn't it wound you, the things we said? Of course, I admitted. I'm human. The word stung. But I've been underestimated before. I've been dismissed and overlooked and told I couldn't do things. And every time, I've proven people wrong not by arguing, but by succeeding. Not by defending myself, but by being undeniably excellent at what I do. That's what we're trying to teach the scholarship kids, Eleanor said. That success is the best response to doubt. Exactly, I said. And you're learning it yourself. You're teaching it. That makes everything worth it. The terrace door opened and Victoria emerged, still in her wedding dress, looking radiant. There you are, she said. They're about to cut the cake. Mom, Grace, they need us for photos. As we walked back inside, Victoria linked her arm through mine on one side and Eleanor's on the other. You know, Victoria said, a year ago, if someone had told me that my mother-in-law would become one of my closest mentors and favorite people, I would have laughed. But here we are. Here we are indeed, I said, smiling. Grace, Victoria said, I have to ask. That night when you called your CFO during dinner, had you planned that? Was the timing deliberate? I smiled mysteriously. Let's just say Patricia is very good at knowing exactly when I need an important-sounding phone call. Eleanor laughed. You staged the whole phone call? The information was real, I clarified. But the timing? That might have been influenced by a text I sent from under the table during appetizers. Victoria laughed, delighted. So you're saying you orchestrated the entire reveal? I'm saying, I replied, that sometimes life gives you perfect moments, and sometimes you have to create them. As I watched Michael and Victoria cut their wedding cake, surrounded by family and friends from all walks of life, I thought about the journey that had brought us here. A year ago, I'd sat in a country club dining room, being judged and dismissed by people who couldn't see past my simple dress and worn shoes. Tonight, I stood in a ballroom full of people who understood what I'd always known, that wealth is about more than money. It's about the relationships you build, the lives you touch, the changes you inspire, the character you display when no one is watching. Michael caught my eye from across the room and mouthed, I love you. I mouthed it back, and I thought about all the mothers out there, in modest apartments and working-class neighborhoods, raising their children with love and sacrifice and determination, mothers who might be judged by their clothes or their cars or their zip codes, but who are building something more valuable than any bank account, strong, principled, empathetic human beings. So I'll ask you, as I ask myself every day, when you meet someone new, what do you see first? Their appearance? Their status? Or do you look for their character, their kindness, their humanity? And when someone judges you by your appearance, how do you respond? With anger? Or with the quiet confidence that comes from knowing your own worth? Because at the end of the day, the most powerful thing you can own isn't a company or a country club membership or a designer wardrobe. It's the certainty of knowing who you are, regardless of what anyone else thinks. And that, my friends, is something no one can ever take from you. The story you've just heard has been changed in names and places to protect the identity of the people involved. We are not telling this to judge, but with the hope that someone will listen and stop to reflect on how we treat others based on assumptions. I truly wonder, if you were in my place, what would you have done? Would you have revealed yourself immediately? Or would you have let the evening play out, giving them the chance to show their true character? And more importantly, have you ever judged someone by their appearance? Have you ever dismissed someone because of how they dressed or where they lived? I think we all have. The question is, what do we do with that recognition? I want to know your opinion because every story is like a candle that can light the way for someone else. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Tell me about a time when you were underestimated, or a time when you underestimated someone else. Let's learn from each other. God always blesses, and I am convinced that courage leads us to better days. Meanwhile, on the final screen, I am leaving you with two of the channel's most beloved stories. I am sure they will surprise you. Thank you for staying with me until this moment. And remember, true wealth isn't what you have. It's who you are.